Respected Professor K.K. Chaudhary, Director, Heritage Business School, Mr. Shugata Haldar, Honorable Speaker of the Day, faculty colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear students, good morning to one and all present here. I, Dr. Bobby Basu, teacher in charge, Heritage Business School, take this privilege to welcome you all to this webinar. Now, we are glad to share with our speaker that under the visionary leadership of our top management, Heritage Business School has achieved many accolades. To name a few, in the recent past, Heritage Business School has been awarded as the best education brand in 2020 by ET Edge, an initiative by Economic Times. Heritage Business School has also been declared as the most preferred B school in 2020 in the East at the 13th ASSOCHAM Higher Education Forum. Now, at Heritage Business School, as you know, apart from academics, we organize industry institute interface sessions on a regular basis where we invite experts from corporate houses as well as academia to share their vast experience with our students so as to enhance their practical knowledge. Today, we are very happy to have amongst us Mr. Shogata Haldar, Associate Partner, MCSC, a business and HR consulting firm. Mr. Haldar is an accomplished professional with over 28 years in the corporate world. He has been into sales and marketing, sales and human capital development work for many years. He started his career with sales and marketing function, and then he moved into HR domain as a part of career development process. He has worked in various industries, including IT, training and consulting, telecom, building and construction, building materials, and tea, both in India as well as in abroad. He has managed country HR head roles with experience in leading the entire human capital initiative, designing change platforms, integrating same with the overall business landscape, and building HR as a key strategic domain within the organization. He has also been a part of the top management and the executive committee responsible for designing the future growth roadmap of the group. His domain expertise includes change management, strategic HR, training in sales and HR domain, and talent management. He's a regular speaker at various seminars and conclave, and one of his pet subjects is future of work at workplaces. Passionate about literature and films, he is also a keen sports enthusiast, and true to his radical ways and thinking, is equally passionate about films, books, cars, and aviation. Perhaps a good example of synergy of contradictions. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Haldar, once again.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Mr. Haldar will be speaking on the topic, VUCA is the new normal. We often hear that we live in a VUCA world where rapid and unpredictable change has become the norm. I'm sure everybody knows what VUCA stands for. Just to recapitulate, V stands for volatility, meaning the rate of change is very, very fast and uncontrollable. U stands for uncertainty, meaning the future is unpredictable, making it hard to prepare for. So it is difficult to use patterns and previous events to predict the future or the outcomes. C stands for complexity, which means there are multiple factors at play from within the organization or beyond the organizations, and moreover, there are unpredictable interaction among these factors also. And A stands for ambiguity, making confusion arising from the combination of volatile, uncertain, and complex environment. In this VUCA world, due to pandemic COVID as well as Industrial Revolution 4.0, there are certain skills and domains that are still in and shall be in demand. So without further ado, I would now request our speaker of the day, Mr. Shugata Haldar, to start his deliberation. I would request you all to put your queries in the chat box so that it can be taken in for discussion in the question answer session. Over to you, Mr. Haldar.
Thank you so much, Professor Basu, and thank you for having me over. It's a pleasure and a privilege both. I had opportunities to go to the campus and speak to your students several times in the past, but under COVID times, obviously it has to be online. I just wanted to check if I'll just start the share. I'll just share a presentation which I wanted to. So it says VUCA is the topic that we would have supposed to discuss is VUCA is the new normal. And the reason why we said VUCA is because of multiple reasons. And obviously the one of the most important is it's Industrial Revolution 4.0, and particularly because of AI. And I'm not talking about just the here and now and the next 6 months and a year. Rather, I would like to look at a time frame of over the next 5, maybe 10, a decade between now and the next decade or so, because all of you who are students today doing your management curriculum would be in the corporate space over the next decade. Your careers will span for the next decade, 2 decades plus. So it is important to look at how the world might, in all probability, will look like, just not because of what is happening today, but what is happening today, how it will reshape the world from now and in future. So it's VUCA is the new normal, Industrial Revolution 4, and the world and AI, the world today and tomorrow, how we think it would look like. If you choose to ask me questions even in between, feel free to unmute and ask, else we can take it at the end of the session. I'm either way is okay. Let me start with a few home truths. When I say home truth, these are given. I think there's no point debating on few things. This is a given kind of thing. And the first point is past is truly history. Is this visible so far? Just to double check.
Yes, it's visible, but a part of it is not being shown. On the right-hand side is not clear.
When you say not clear, what would you mean exactly? The word is, can you see the what is written there on the
no,
top
sir.
right?
No, sir. It's like it's being cut out from the screen.
Really?
Yes, sir.
Oh. Acha. What is the reason? Just 1 minute. Is this okay?
Yeah, this is better, sir.
On full screen, it's not coming, is it? It's something very strange. Actually, let me then manage it this way. Then I don't know why it would be that way.
Full screen it will come, Mr. Haldar. Full screen it will come.
They're saying that it is. Is this visible now? The
yes, sir. Now it's visible.
Okay, great.
It was not showing, sir.
Sure. So what we said is that there are some home truths that we need to kind of put out of the way. First is the past is truly history. When I say past is history, it's like a oxymoron. Past and history are the same kind of words, but I deliberately put it together because what has happened is gone. It will not repeat itself. The world yesterday is truly gone. Yesterday's rules may not work anymore, most likely will not work anymore. When I say rules, I'm saying rules of work, rules at workplace, the way business shall metamorph itself, etc., etc. Why we say that, we'll try and examine as we go along. It's a jigsaw puzzle with all pieces in the disarray. You know, we all understand what a jigsaw puzzle is. We have those in childhood. We used to have those jigsaw puzzle. There are multiple small pieces. We have to use that and kind of frame a picture or of a lion or a dragon or whatever it is which is there. And we used to play with that when we were a child. We still do, I'm sure. Children still do in some form, just that it has become more tech heavy. But the problem in today's world is that it's like a jigsaw puzzle with the pieces in disarray. Now we need to put the pieces together because Professor Basu, and this session is all about VUCA. Professor Basu mentioned that what is VUCA. So because it is volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, the jigsaw puzzle are in disarray. But the problem is that there is no reference pick to solve the puzzle, and that's the big challenge. In our childhood, when we solve the jigsaw puzzle, there is a reference picture with which we need to match and put the pieces together to form a complete picture. Because it's a complex VUCA scenario today, the reference frame is not there. So we are trying to grapple with what we think is right, because the reference frame, the ecosystem is changing so fast that there's no static ecosystem to refer to in order to solve the problem. This mess of wires that you see on the left-hand side, if you follow my cursor, On the left-hand side, this huge mess of wire. If I ask you to make sense out of it, it is extremely difficult because it's all jumbled up. And that's exactly what the reality today look like. And therefore, I always say in the VUCA world, it's one blind man leading the other. None of us, least of all me, can claim to be experts and exact soothsayers of saying what's going to happen over the next 5-10 years. We can only make an estimated, maybe an educated estimate at best, but none of us can probably say this is how it shall be, QED, probably not. So that's some of the home truth that I wanted to put out of the way, because that's the reality of VUCA. Why do we say this is because, why is it this way? Is because, as many of us would know, we are in the middle of the technological tsunami that's happening. Just to look back around, if you follow my cursor on the bottom left corner, 1780s, around that time, and give and take few years, and don't hold me exactly to the year, we first had the steam engine and the first mechanization, the dawn of modern industrial revolution started. You might, if you wish, call it Industry 1.0, followed by true industrialization about 100 years after that, towards the end of around 1870 plus, when we had electricity come into play. We already had steam and we already had locomotives, so industrialization was truly on its way. 100 years down the line, about that time, we had the IT technology coming into play globally, and we had this huge IT boom, and the whole world warmed up to the fascinating IT technologies that came and influenced civilization overall. But what's happening for the last almost 2 decades, which we now call digitalization or digitization, it's actually what is Industry Revolution 4, if you see it bottom right corner. And this is where the game today is. And suffice it to say that this Industry Revolution 4 digitization is completely different. Forget about Industry 1 and 2, even from IT, the kind of impact of change velocity that Industry Revolution 3, which is IT revolution, brought. The change velocity and the velocity of VUCA because of Industry Revolution 4 is a completely different ball game. There is no comparison even with the IT revolution, and let's examine why. But before that, a quick view, so that we are on the same page. What really do we mean by digitization? Some quick word. So that what does technology do today? They automate and optimize the process, the whole business process. They integrate the ecosystem. This is important. Supplier, partners, customers, whoever is there, in a seamless, boundaryless platform. Develop a personalized customer experience to retain loyalty. All these are digitization, and create a new and most important disruptive business model, because the change is so fast, the change is so continuous, the change is so exhaustive that no business model that does not adapt or cannot adapt will survive. And let me establish that with an example just after this. I'll show you a data. I picked it up from somewhere. Just follow my cursor. This is the largest company by market cap. So I think we all understand what is market cap. I'll not simply put, forget the formula to calculate. It's the valuation of a company. If a company needs to be in simple terms, it is what is the valuation of a particular company at a given point. Now, these are in 2001. This is interesting data. 2001. Just look at the color code, and that's there are 2 kinds of code on this chart: green and black. And we are looking at the top 5 companies by market cap. And if you notice, in 2001, there were 4 blacks and 1 green. The difference being that green look at companies which are into technology, and black are those which are in the conventional space, non-technology products primarily. Though by today, everybody is widely dispersed and do many things, but by and large. So 2001, look at the ones that are in the top 5. There are 4 non-tech companies, namely GE, Exxon, Citi, and Walmart, and only 1 green. Forget who's number 1, number 2. That's not important. And only 1 green, Microsoft. 5 years hence, pretty much the same scene. 1 green, 4 black. 2011, pretty much the same thing. 4 black, only 1 green, and that's Apple, no more Microsoft, but that doesn't matter. There's still non-tech companies dominating the top 5 valuation chart. And suddenly in 5 years' time, some magic happens. All 5 in the top are green. And this is important. We have Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. And I couldn't trace 2020 data. I believe it's out, but that's not the point. I think the trend is obvious. So 2011 to 2016, the moot point out that the takeaway from this data is 2011 to 2016, some magic happened. And brands which had been with us, civilization, for the last many, many decades, Exxon, PetroChina, Shell, ICBC, Citi, Total, GE, they all vanished from the top 5 in terms of market cap. And they were replaced by the babies of yesterday. You know, Amazon, Facebook, these are babies of yesterday, and they came and replaced the top heavy, these giants like these names like Exxon and GE and Citi and everybody. So that's the learning is that the new mantra is speed, not size. And this, I think, is very important for all of us to understand, that in order to survive and succeed in today's world as a business organization, how big you are is not relevant anymore. That is not your strength. How adaptable, how quickly can you adjust, how quickly can you morph yourself to changing ecosystem. In other words, speed is what will guarantee success. It took less than a decade for Facebook to come into the top 5. It took about the same time for Amazon to come into the top 5, etc. The point is how big you are. You could be a GE or an ExxonMobil or a Citibank there for 100 years and huge global corporates, but that doesn't anymore guarantee success. I'm not saying that size is not at all important. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is, till yesterday, it was a precursor to success. Now and in future, that will in fact be not an issue at all, because in fact, size can at times make you, often does, as an organization, make your systems and processes slow to react because you're too large, you're too heavy. Whereas somebody who's nimble, somebody who's quick, can adapt to the change that's happening around, to the VUCA environment. And that is what will guarantee success. Let me, and the reason why we say this, just a quick step back, we are into the quantum computing age, and those who are especially, I come from a physics background, so those who are from similar backgrounds would understand. If you are not, doesn't matter. We are in the quantum computing age, which essentially means, I've tried to make it simple in a layman language. If conventional computing is reading every book in a library one by one, I enter a library, there are 1,000 books, I pick up book number 1 and I start reading page 1, page 2, page 3 onwards, I finish book 1, go to book 2 and so on. If that is conventional computing, quantum computing is reading every book in the library, all 1,000 books, each page of each book simultaneously. That's the difference in speed between what conventional computing can achieve and what quantum quantum computing is a different debate and discussion. I'm not getting there right now. The origin of that is in quantum physics, but that's not the focus area here. But the point we are making is that technology has taken us to a stage where the IT revolution, if it is reading the book one by one page at a time, quantum computing, it's what the technology of today and tomorrow is. Today is and tomorrow shall be, is about reading the library books all at the same time, all pages. So that's the difference we are talking about, maybe even more. Let me throw some words to you. Known words, I'm sure. Artificial intelligence, 3D printing, I'm just throwing up these words. Augmented and virtual reality, robotics, genome and biotech, this whole space, IoT, that is Internet of Things, Bitcoin. All these are domains, technology spaces which has been there for almost a decade plus minus. They're getting kind of more and more advanced over the last decade plus minus. And over now we have this huge fantastic friend of ours called COVID, which has hit the world maybe about, depending on which country you talk about, maybe if I look at China as the initiator, maybe December, January. So about 8-9 months. And so this is the landscape today. You have all these technology domains which are changing like mad. We are developing like mad at a quantum computing speed. And over and above that, we have COVID. So if this is not VUCA, we really don't know what is. And this is something we haven't experienced as a business organization, as a civilization, forget business organization, perhaps ever in the past. So this kind of phenomenal velocity in the ecosystem and multiple direction velocity is what is creating a VUCA environment. And therefore, as a business organization, as a professional, which is what you shall be in the near future, going into the professional world, you have to understand that you have to navigate, succeed, and survive in this kind of a landscape. And that requires a lot of agility apart from your domain skill, your ability to adapt, your ability to adjust. Before all that, your ability to be aware of what's happening around you, the kind of change that is impacting the ecosystem, etc. To understand this better, let me take a step back. However, while all this is true, I also do believe maybe the velocity was a little less, but there has been such examples in the past where, because the ecosystem changed, maybe at a slower velocity, careers, jobs, skill sets, they also either changed or vanished and new skill sets came into play. So let's look at an example. And the reason I'm saying this, that new skill sets came into play, maybe at a lesser velocity, is because it is important for all of us to understand that what you are studying today, and which is extremely important, you must know your subject well, but that's not the end of everything. It only starts you on a journey of non-stop learning. The only challenge is now the learning will be faster, more, and you need to be aware and adapting continuously. However, this was so even earlier, maybe at a lesser extent. Let's look at a picture. This, I would believe, I picked it up from the internet. I think this is New York, if I'm not mistaken. About 100 plus years back, the time is given there, 1895 to 1900, plus minus. And if you note, what is important is if you notice the picture, there are a host of, obviously, the so-called motor car, if I may call it. Personal motor car was not yet there in the world, and just about to come in around this time. It still was horse-driven carriages and horse-ridden carriages. Personal vehicle was equal to a horse carriage of various kinds and different models, different types. So there was a traffic jam of horse carriages rather than cars as we are familiar today with. However, 5 years hence, in about 19102, I could again pick this up interestingly from the internet. It's an interesting data, because the motor car was just about coming into the play in certain countries. I picked up a lovely advertisement, and a very old one those days, which says dispense with a horse. Obviously, because you do no more need this. You don't need the horse carriage anymore. They're trying to tell us that you don't need the horse anymore and the complex maintenance of a horse, and you need a separate stable for having a horse, and etc. etc. Here you have a motor car, and something that runs on fuel, and there is an engine, so on and so forth. It was almost like a concept sales, not a brand sale, but a concept sale to begin with. And so it says dispense with a horse. But this is not to discuss the advertisement and its merits, much rather. What is important here is in 1915, 15 years hence, 19102, they are saying dispense with a horse, trying to establish the concept of a motor car, trying to change habits of people to shift from motor cars to automobile. And in 15 years, this is the Ford Motor Company picture, we had 1 million cars on the road. This is American data in America, but in 1915, 1 million car was on the road, which means that in 15 years, this product called motor car gained popularity like nobody's business. So the question that comes up obviously is, if you can see this picture again, a real picture of those days, I have a red arrow marked here. Here is the coachman who technically you can say the driver of the horse carriage. This person, my question to all of ourselves is, to all of you and me, myself, is what happens to his job when this is the reality? If this person is an exceptionally skilled and high-skilled person at his job, but then technology is taking his job away. The change of technology is ensuring that probably he will not be relevant for much longer. This is a public transport, a lot of people there. Same case is a private transport. What happens to him if these people shift to a motor car tomorrow? These ladies drive a motor car tomorrow. What happens to him? The only hope is, or hope was, if the individual here and likewise others realize that there is a technology change that has happened. It's already here, whether I like it or not. And I'm willing to reskill, adapt, change with speed, faster the better, and acquire new skills, which is how to, from driving a horse carriage, on how to drive a mechanized motor vehicle. If I learn driving, then I'll still remain employable. I still remain relevant in a new ecosystem. But if I choose not to, then I can't blame others and the system for saying that I'm out of a job. So the moot point is that, do I reskill myself all the time? The answer is yes. And that is what shall only be even more accentuated in the times to come. Year 2019, we are already having driverless cars. It's about 14 million jobs for drivers. What happens to him? Same case. Tomorrow we are having, it's a matter of time, 5, maximum a decade. We'll have driverless cars in many parts of the world, maybe even India, I don't know. And what career advice would you give to this person? What does he do? Because technically speaking, the job of a driver might not exist over the next decade, decade and a half. This is just an example. I mean, one can give hundreds of examples across domains. The point again is, it is not that it's something to be worried about. It's not. It's about multiple. In fact, it's the other way around. Let me emphasize this repeatedly, that you will have multiple opportunities, which, for example, 25 years back when I started, we didn't have so many opportunities, but tomorrow's career options will be many, many and much, much more, provided as an individual I'm willing to explore, I'm willing to adapt, and I'm willing to do it fast and remaining agile. A quick look back, unbelievable. 10 years ago, look at the pace of change. That's what I'm trying to establish. 10 years ago, there was no social network. Flickr, MySpace, Blogger, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, ABCD. Every day we have a new one coming up. So there's no, it's unimaginable. And just about a decade. I mean, don't hold me to exactly 10 years to the date, but point is, around that time, or maybe a little plus minus, and we already can't imagine life without social media. This is the kind of pace at which the habits of people have changed globally. Go back 10 more years, and we did, about that time, we didn't have the web. Around year 2000, it was just about coming into play globally. In certain countries, it was already there. Maybe not 2000, maybe 1997, 98. So again, the point is, can we imagine this today? And I started my career 27 years back, and I didn't even know what WWW meant. For me, it was, in those days, the WWW was a World Wildlife, there was a wildlife organization, and pretty famous, and that's how it was more popularly WWW was referred to that, and not what we understand it today. Today's kid, if you tell him or her WWW, they will refer only to the web. So 20 years back, around, or a little more than that maybe, we were not connected the way we are today. So it's a different world altogether. It's a different pace at which things are changing. And it's humongous. And therefore, if you happen to work in the web programming, online marketing, mobile phone, likewise industries today, the interesting point is that your job did not exist 20 years ago or thereabouts as a job, because that domain was not there. So the key question is, the important question is, do we know what jobs will exist 20 years from now? And mind you, this is at a time 20 years ago until today, the pace of change was nothing compared to what it shall be between now and the next 10, 20 years, because of VUCA and because of what we said a while back, that the pace of change is going to be completely different because of Industry Revolution 4, because of digitization, because of AI, because of big data, and so on. It's already happening, and it will only become much, much more powerful, and gather speed as we go along. So what jobs might exist? One really doesn't know exactly, but while let's pause here, I'll come back to this a bit later. These are just trying to, the session here, I'm trying to provoke and make you aware, provoke you and make you aware of the ecosystem around us. And this is what we all understood work to be. I certainly did 25 years back when I started. Work used to be a place, an office where you go, quote unquote, to work. And is it so today? And because of COVID too, now and the whole world is working online. You and I are having this interaction online on this platform. And so the definition of work has already changed and shall change more as we go along. Because yesterday, this is so. This work had to be a place where you physically need to go, because technology was obviously not half as good as it is today. Because we had options like landline phones and snail mail, and that was about it. I'm talking about maybe 20 years back, even 25 years back. This is all that we had. There was no cell phone. I mean, it's unimaginable now. I often wonder, on the lighter note, that what would have happened to the world had, for example, COVID happened 25 years back, when there was no cell phone, there was no internet, there was no social media. How would have people survived? Even now, we are not surviving, obviously, the way we would want to, but at least there is some semblance of activity going on because of the technology platforms. Likewise here. However, if this was 25 years back, if COVID had hit us 25 years back, I mean, what would have happened? We would have actually been isolation in the true sense of the word. And there would have been no physical contact, no interaction because of the virus, and yet no virtual interaction possible either, because the technology is not there. So it's something to pause and wonder. So therefore, today it seems, when I look back at this, it seems a different world. And yet, when I started my career, and me or those who are in my generation, this was pretty common, and we were pretty okay with it, because we never missed the new technologies that today I miss, because I've got used to it. So its life changes that way. But today, project teams use amazing web tools. We are familiar. You're all students of today's generation. You are more aware of this than I am, more familiar with these technologies than many of us are. You are using amazing web tools to work together from anywhere in the world. But there is an implication of this. There is a consequence of this. And I'll tell you what that is. Skype, again, and all kinds of, post-COVID, multiple video conferencing calls platforms have come up. You have the Zooms and the Google Meets and the Microsoft Teams and the Geos and many others. Likewise, Skype, in fact, has become backdated. You no more use Skype or talk Skype. But the point remains that connect long distance, both for voice and for video, is now commonplace. And this session is an example of that. But the point again is, the key point is that if this is true, that you have project teams working from across the globe, the implication is that your job is not restricted to a particular location, because you no more have to quote unquote go to work or a particular office. You can sit at a particular point and become quote unquote an employee of someone who is based elsewhere, an organization which is based elsewhere, because you can work on project and web tools. And this is pretty much the trend coming up. So when you look at careers of yours over in the first 5 years of your career, let's say post management, keep this in mind, that you need not necessarily only explore jobs limited to a locality, limited to a geography. You can, in fact, apply and be accepted in jobs, if you have the right skills, of course, for jobs anywhere in the world, for which you may not necessarily have to relocate. And that's the important point. There are hundreds and thousands of such assignments available where you can pick up jobs, do work from a remote location. In fact, that's the preferred model with many employers today because of cost benefits. You need to be aware of that and need to search those out. If you want, we can have an offline chat in this later, but this session is not for that. But I'm just making you aware of the possibilities. And these possibilities are there with you today. Unfortunately, we're not there with us. But make best use of. While on the one hand, there is a VUCA environment, things are changing like crazy, yet it is also throwing up multitude of opportunities. And you need to look at both. It's just not because there is change, what the hell will I do? Will I become outdated? No, it's not that. It's about the multitude of new opportunities that will throw up. If you're aware of it, you should be able to make best use of it. Okay. Why I said that this is possible, long distance work, etc., because crowdsourcing, again, I think you're aware of it. These are familiar terms. Many organizations crowdsource. So a particular task is divided and given to hundreds of people. They together contribute, and then you assimilate and kind of coalesce it into a common finished task. Many a time, many a time, however, this is also done free of cost, and that's the many of us, and I'm sure many of us know this, that Wikipedia operated on a crowdsourced model, which is why Wikipedia's data is never very reliable, because many people contribute to those data, and the reliability therefore of the data, the validity of those data was never out of question. But if you do crowdsourcing in a controlled manner, it's fine, where you sanitize the data, you filter the right data that has come in from multiple people who are giving you the input, then it's fine. But the point remains that crowdsourcing is a trend that has caught on in the job world, in the professional world, and you might become one of the individuals in the crowdsourcing group and contribute to tasks. In fact, you can do it right now as you are studying. This could be parallel activities in your free time you can do, and there are many such opportunities going around. And you can earn decent amount of money also while you do this, and it is not very time consuming. There are so many examples. I've just picked up one or two. Threadless was one brand that finds t-shirt designs to sell from submission and voting by crowds. It's a crowdsource example. There are many more. I think JetBlue did it, etc. I can give you a reCAPTCHA example. These are real life examples, so I'm just quickly walking you through these. In reCAPTCHA, what happens is, and this is ongoing for quite a long time, multiple projects are being digitized because physical books are to be kept in libraries. Books get old, historical documents get old. It's not only space consuming, but it's extremely difficult to maintain, and they get destroyed. There are bookworms that come into play, all kinds of ants. The books get destroyed. Maintaining it properly is an expensive proposition. It requires space, because every day books and pages are getting printed and added overall in the world. So how much space can you allot? So digitization is the only answer. But in digitizing the books, one challenge has come up. What people realized was that in many of those books, because they were old or for whatever reason, many letters, many words which were printed earlier, or maybe even older books which were handwritten, or there are handwritten notes which needs to be digitized. The OCR, the machine is unable, the camera is unable to read the exact letter or the exact handwriting because it is not very clear, or is it not very, it has got smudged with time, etc., etc. So what do you do? Now, what do you do with something you have become very familiar with, all of us? The moment you log into any particular site, will be presented with this kind of a saying that type the 2 words, or just to prove that you are not a bot, etc., etc. While you are not a bot is one objective, of course, of this exercise, but the other objective is that these are one such word, typically, this is one such word which some digital exercise somewhere in some book found difficult to digitize because the words were not easily understood, the machine couldn't read it properly, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, it has been thrown open into the whole world, so it's crowdsourcing, where you and I are looking at this data and manually typing it in the box here as to what the letters actually are. And once we type it afresh here in this box, which is a new type, normal word typeface document, it becomes a normal word, normal computer typed word face, then the digital scanner can pick it up easily. So digitization becomes easy. So essentially, reCAPTCHA works by presenting people with 2 words to retype when they go to create a new account on a partner website or whatever. And the first word verifies that you are a human being, not a bot. The second is from a scanned book that a computer could not read. And that's how you are becoming a crowdsourced employee of reCAPTCHA. You're doing their job, and on a funny side, you're not even getting paid, but their job is getting done. But the point is that this is how the crowdsourcing model works also. We might take 15 seconds to type that word. Globally, if you add up the millions of people who are doing the same, it's an amazing 150,000 hours of work every day, unimaginable. You can't do it by employing people, and this is free of cost. So imagine the productivity. So essentially the point is that you have to be innovative with your task. reCAPTCHA could have employed 10,000 people, have done the same job. They chose to go another way. So this is, one might argue whether they're doing it ethically, unethically. I'm not getting there, but the fact of the matter is that they are being able to find an innovative way. and therefore get much higher productivity output than they would have ever got with a normal routine way of work by employing people. And therefore, I always say the word career is as outdated as the typewriter. Career doesn't mean that you will not have a job. Please don't misunderstand this. By career, I mean the word career in the classical sense of the word, which means that, you normally when we say career, we understand it that we start at the junior level and then we start growing with time. From an executive, I become a senior executive or an assistant manager, then a manager, and so on and so forth, a vertical growth. Those similar or siloed definition of career will no more exist for two reasons. It's already slowly going away and it will only become faster. It will only die away faster. It only means that the definition of career will change, and as tomorrow's employees, you need to be aware and be adapt to it. The organizations worldwide, because of cost pressures, now more so because of COVID, even more so because of the VUCA ecosystem, must optimize cost. There is no other option if they have to survive. If they have to optimize cost, they have to, and more important, if you remember, we said that speed is essential for survival, not size. Now, speed is possible only when you are nimble, you are lightweight, you can move fast. So as an organization, you need to be lightweight. You need to be flexible to be able to speedily adjust, adapt everything that you do, your business model, your people, your systems, your process, everything, to adapt to a changing ecosystem all around you, your VUCA ecosystem all around you. So therefore, they will always want to be nimble, always want to be lightweight. And one element of lightweight is fewer people on board, lesser systems processes, which is easier to maneuver. It's like having a small car in a small by-lane rather than driving a large Mercedes in a by-lane, because it will not get into that by-lane. A small car will. So therefore, organizations will also attempt to shift from a very heavy kind of a structure to a nimble, what we now call an agile org structure. This is not a session on agile structure, but that's the new thing that's happening all around the world. In many organizations already, they're shifting to what is called agile structure, where no structure, when I say structure, I mean the org structure, where you have a CUMD at the top, then you have various departmental heads, then you have teams below them, and so on and so forth. That kind of a structure is kind of dying away and giving rise to what is called an agile structure, where no structure is the structure. But then even if it sounds strange, but let's not get there. That's not the session all about. But the point is that it's when I say career, so you're going to be stepping into a world tomorrow, maybe just not in the next 1 year, but you will see it coming definitely in the next 5 to 10 years more as you progress in your career in the corporate world. You have to realize that your career development, of course, you will grow in career for sure, but that will not be the conventional definition. You will grow horizontally, having bigger domains, because organizations will be flatter now. There'll be fewer layers so that they can stay nimble, so that they can stay fast. Therefore, you can't have so many vertical layers to go from executive to senior executive to very senior executive. That will not happen. But what will happen is that you will have bigger domains if you are good. You will have more complex tasks if you are good, and your salary will correspondingly go up. So the nature of career will change. And also because of project-based teams working globally from everywhere, please remember that when I source recruit a candidate for a particular task, any company in the world may not recruit from a particular location only, because I may recruit from anywhere in the world, because he or she whom I might, as long as I get the best candidate, because he or she might work remotely for me sitting wherever he or she is. And the same might apply to you. You might be sourced by anybody in the world, and you might continue to work for him or her sitting wherever you are. I'm not saying it will be possible for all kinds of jobs overnight, but for certain kind of jobs, it's already possible. It's happening. It will keep happening for more kinds of job as technology keeps changing because of the VUCA scenario, and it will only keep growing, that trend. And therefore, I believe that project teams are beginning to resemble movie production teams. In a movie, when a movie gets made, somebody sits down and writes a story and a script. Then there is a director, there are actors and actresses chosen. Director, lightman, cameraman, this, that, actor, all come together, editor, and they all come to music director, etc. They all come together. They make the film. Once the team of 100 people who make that film, the film is over and released, those 100 individuals go their own separate ways, and they may or may not work again together. We don't know. So independent individuals with unique talents get together to work on a company project. This is how it seems it shall be now and in future. So you have the flexibility of not only working as an employee, but also parallelly or separately working as individual expert, working for multiple employers at the same time as an individual expert, and doing different projects at the same time simultaneously as an independent expert. And that's going to give you far more money. And this trend may not be so visible right now, but it's already happening in many parts of the world. India is slowly coming in, but I'm for sure I can guarantee you the next 5 years, this will suddenly catch on, even more so now because of COVID. COVID has only brought these things far more to the focus. Without COVID, it might have taken 2 years more, 5 years more, but with COVID, this has become much more obvious now. And at the end, they'll go their separate ways. They might work together and they might not. We don't know. This is how the company's structure employees might also look like. So it's all about virtual teams. It's quite a radical possibility. This is not to say that organization as we understand them, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that from tomorrow organizations as we understand them today is vanishing. No, I'm saying that you have a potential employee are having options beyond just a conventional organization. You are having opportunities beyond that. It's for you to be aware of it and therefore go and search it out, depending on what you prefer. I want to focus, therefore, that by 2029, there's a statement by Ray Kurzweil, who is the group director of engineering at Google. I think he has since moved out, but anyway, artificial intelligence will outperform humans at everything. Why do I suddenly come to this slide from here? And there's a reason. Here's this famous book called The Singularity is Near. I don't know how many of you have read it or have looked at it. This particular book, there are many other, but this particular book that he has written called The Singularity is Near. In physics, we have this concept called singularity when the big bangs happened. So singularity is where everything converges to extremely high density. I wouldn't even say a particle, it's less than that. So artificial intelligence will outperform. Now, some argue 2029, it might not happen by then, it's not a question of whether it will happen on 2029. If not 2029, a matter of maybe 5 more years, 6 more years, but it's a question of a few years here or there. It's no more, actually will it happen? That question is already answered. It will happen. One may debate whether it is 2 decade away from now, 10 years from now, or 15 years from now. Certainly not more than 20 years. That's a guarantee, maybe less. So many of you who are working, who are studying today, would pretty much see that work environment over the next 10, 15 years. And this will be a completely different work environment than what you understand it to be today. And AI, along with the other technologies that I initially had a slide on, if you remember, 3D printing, IoT, Bitcoin, genome BTech, biotech and genome, etc. These things will revolutionize workspace, life in fact, because of this Industry Revolution 4 digitization. If you go back to our first slide, the way it will revolutionize is unheard of in human history till date, including the IT revolution. Now, what is therefore, this AI is actually already impacting us in many ways. Some of us are aware of it, some of us are not even aware of it, and therefore it is going to impact the workplace. It will throw up huge opportunities, fascinating opportunities for new careers, new kind of careers, and it's for us to go up and grab them. But just a single, I'm not getting into what is AI, that's a different discussion. Some of you who might be having some idea about it would know, some might not, but this is not a session on AI. Suffice it to just say, I'll just spend one single slide on what is AI so that we are on the same page, just the theoretical definition, and I'll stick to that. And what is the theoretical definition of AI? Is artificial intelligence, together artificial intelligence. So essentially it is, what do we mean by intelligence? Is the capacity to learn and solve problems. In simple terms, I mean, let's not split hair on the exact definition. That's not the intent. The purpose of this slide is to just give a simple understanding, a common understanding of what is AI. So if we understand intelligence to be the capacity to learn and solve problems, then AI is the simulation of human intelligence by machines. It's as simple as that. When machines become as intelligent as human beings, have they become already that intelligent? Not really. Have they become part intelligent as we are? 1,000 times yes, that's already there. Will they become as intelligent or even more intelligent? A jury is still out, but the huge amount of data that is already available, machines which are already there, the signal is very obvious. The answer is a categorical yes. Time is not far away when the machine will be more intelligent than a human. I know it's a radical statement to make. When I made this in some other forum, in few other forum, there had been people who are saying, no, that can't happen. Okay, I don't want to kind of, debate that right now, but if you ask it's my individual opinion basis what I see. I do a little bit of work on this space also. So what I am seeing around me, it's a matter of time when artificial intelligence will be more intelligent than a human being. By the way, so basically AI, last line, basically the machines, sorry, which will be able to simulate human intelligence so as to solve problem and also be able to act rationally. And in other words, act like human being. That is what AI is all about. By the way, just quick snapshot. There are two kinds, broadly classified as two kinds of AI. We have weak AI. When I say weak AI, it basically means you can see the shop floor. This is an actual picture of a shop floor of an automaker. And do you see a single person in this shop floor? Somebody who's manually doing anything? The answer is no. Everything is on a machine. I'm saying the word machine loosely. They are artificially intelligent machines, but the technology used here is called weak artificial intelligence, which means machines which are designed to respond to specific situations, which means this machine somewhere here, if you follow my cursor, probably is intelligent enough to paint the car. And that's all that it can do. This machine here has the intelligence to maybe put the chassis together. And that's what it is capable of doing. This machine is capable of doing something else, some other specific task. So weak AI is when machine is intelligent enough, if given a command, is to carry out a specific task. It's called weak AI. But when they do that, even if that's a limited task, they'll do it obviously A, better, B, faster, and C, in a more clinical way than even the best of the human hands, simply because that they are automated. They will be obviously able to do it in a better way, in a faster way, and faster is more important because that gives rise to economy of scale for the organization. The product can become cheaper because the machine will do 100 times more in 1 unit time than the best human being can do. The machines can't think for themselves, and therefore they perform routine tasks. So you have Siri from Apple, you have Alexa from Amazon. These are classic examples of weak AI. I'm sure you're familiar with those who know how to play chess. If you sit on the computer and you're trying to play chess with the computer, and the computer is your opponent, that's a good example of AI. Not very weak AI, but still relatively weak AI. Even chess is relatively weak AI. Not as weak as this example. What is called, there are three, actually I didn't want to get into that, but since it got opened up, you have three levels of AI called ANI, narrow level intelligence, which is an example of this. Then you have ASI, which is, let's put it this way, it's a mid-level intelligence. And then you have a third level, ASI, which is basically a very high level of intelligence, where it actually can surpass human beings in whatever they do. So broadly, weak AI, and then we have strong AI. Strong AI is basically that mid-level AI I was talking about. A machine with strong AI is able to think and act like a human and learn from experiences. So supposing if the machine is mid-level AI capability, then if in the morning, if the machine comes and meets me, or I go and say good morning to the machine, it will be intelligent enough to go and fetch me a cup of coffee or tea, depending on what I like. Nobody has asked the machine to, but it is intelligent enough like a human being to sense. I'm not getting into how it is done and all. That's a completely separate session on AI itself, so let's not get there. But the focus, let's remain on VUCA and the new skills. Therefore, that would be important in the new world. So the good morning will be followed by a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or whatever you might have been preferring. The machine will observe what you have a set of food items after good morning and learn from that. That is what is learn from experience, and then from the 5th day or the 6th day offer you the same from whatever options you might have chosen. It's like going into a buffet and out of a menu course of 30 you have chosen 7 items, and the next day you choose again 7, but 2 options are new. You do this permutation combination for 7 days. From the 8th day onwards, the machine will be able to offer you various permutation combination basis your choice that you have demonstrated over the last 1 week. So that is basically strong AI. So much for AI, but this is not a session on AI, but I only wanted to touch upon it to emphasize that the world outside is going to be a very, very different and a very, very exciting world now and in future. Already, AI at work, and these are not weak AI, by the way, it's not very weak AI. Apple supplier Foxconn has AI-enabled robots to manage their store. There's not a single individual in this store. They operate completely on machines. So no manual intervention. So replenishment, billing, customer service, you name it, everything is machine done. So my question is, what happens to jobs of people who wanted to do customer service and were doing it in retail space like this, a store like this? So it's like that driver of a horse carriage getting reskilled. So you have to get reskilled. And this is not a tech job, by the way. Even a non-tech person can learn the basics of how to operate these machines. The machines will be doing the job on their own, but you still might need someone, not this particular machine, but I'm generally saying that you might still need someone to look after, quote unquote, and maintain these machines, and that's not a high-tech job. So you need to be able to reskill yourself, and you might have hundreds of jobs going here, even well-paid ones, by the way, because these are the technologies which are not low-end technology, high-end technologies, and you can learn these skills, and they're available and they're possible. I call it, is this tomorrow's policeman? Do we need a policeman tomorrow? We don't know. This is a cheetah robo. There's a robo which is already there, which can run at this speed. You can see the speed, to 28 plus miles per hour. And that's faster than Usain Bolt. So what happens to various careers tomorrow where this skill, this capability might come into play on the one hand, and it might actually throw up new opportunities for many of us tomorrow. These are all real life pictures, self-explanatory. You don't have anybody manually operating in this mall, at parking lot, at malls, or at a building, whatever. Cars coming into park, the machine guides you into the nearest open space, similar to the car size and shape. That'll do the billing for you as you go out, whatever time it takes, and whatever should be everything. You want to ask him something, the machine will reply to you. It can converse with you like a human being, and so on and so forth. These are not science fiction. This is already happening. This is already at work at various parts of the world. This is already under test, yet not commercially available. But driverless car is a reality. It's only a matter of few years here or there. What happens to, forget drivers, what happens to insurance companies and this whole insurance company business? Because a large part of insurance company business comes from insuring lives against accidents, even death. And if you don't have a driver, and I'm talking particularly of automobile accidents, and if you don't have a driver, who do you insure? So what happens to insurance business and their revenue? Question mark. This is something very already common. It's there in our lives today. You even have the Pizza Huts of the world, XYZ, delivering food at your door. More so now for COVID. In various parts of India, even small towns, I have heard and maybe seen on social media that drones are being used to deliver various things, just not food, even medicines at times. So sniper jobs, which is a military job, you don't need a human being to go and risk his life. The machines can do it. Delivery jobs, defense, surveillance, logistics, many of these are already in play, by the way. I have seen in the agri industry, spraying and topography mapping is something which is very important. Soil conditions, spraying of insecticides or whatever else. All this is brilliantly done by drones, and therefore faster, better, and quicker than what a manual effort would fetch. So the point we are making is that technology. Oh, this is something fascinating. This is one robot that is available. I think this is in Texas, if I'm not mistaken. This is a robo builder which builds a house in less than 4 days. Obviously, this house has a sorry, it has a certain dimension. Obviously, not a palace, but a normal modern house, and it takes 4 days with prefabricated stuff. Can you beat that? I mean, in 4 days, you have a house from scratch. And look at, therefore, the productivity, the turnaround time. And this is, by the way, early days of this kind of intelligence. With time, this will only become better and faster. So you can imagine the kind of change, the real impact of what is really VUCA as we understand it. Imagine this 10 years from now, how efficient and how advanced these machines would become, how intelligent these machines would be, that they might be able to do 1,000 such houses in 4 days. One never knows. And therefore, the great good news is the cost of house might actually come down, because today it needs 1 year to make it, and therefore the costs, if it gets done in 5 days, the cost will be probably 1/10, if not less, maybe lesser. I don't know. So those are the implications on the other side, possibly the positive implications. Those of you who prefer cooking or are saying that culinary skills, what I love, here you have competition coming. Molly Robotics can prepare more than 2,000 types of meals, and these are meals that it has been taught to prepare, and they prepare it faster, better, in a far more standardized taste and flavor than if manually it is done by the best of the chef. Because no matter how good you are as a chef, because a human being would have slight variations in the way you put in some sauce, some ingredients. I don't know much about cooking, so I'm not the right person. But whatever ingredients you put in, you're putting it manually, so there will always be a few milligram here and there difference in the quantity you put in the way you put in. But with machines, remember, it's precision. It's precise to the last. You can, depending on how you program it, you can program it to be precise to the 3rd place, 4th place of decimal, maybe more, in terms of the quantity of ingredients that it is putting in. So the standardization is amazing. Therefore, the taste and flavor will be uniform. Meals will be produced faster, quicker, therefore standardized, and so on and so forth. The consequences of therefore in the industry and in life is significant. These are early days. What I'm showing you is very rare now. It's still there, but still very, very not very widespread, let's say. But we are sitting in 2020. Many of you would be in the corporate world in 2030, if not all of you. And you will be for sure seeing this pretty much in action. The point I'm again making is that there would be a lot of change that's going to happen, and new careers will emerge. Not necessarily that the existing careers will continue. Maybe some of them will die out. It has to die out because of technology change. But then new opportunities will be thrown up. And all I'm submitting repeatedly is, because of VUCA, be aware of these changes, because changes are happening fast, and adapt, align yourself depending on your preference, like what is your passion area, etc. And keep learning new skills. And none of these are high-tech 5-year courses. These are all simple skills that one can pick up depending on your preference to supplement your existing skill. I'm no way saying that your current curriculum that you're doing are not important. They are vitally important. Please, and that's your base. If your base is not good, rest of it will fall flat. So once you've got your base right, which is your current business management curriculum, once that is done, after that, as I said in the beginning, please remember, it is going to be a continuous learning process in the true sense of the term. It's not a jargon. But what you learn and where you learn from and how much you learn, which area you learn, will depend on your choice and where the changes are happening, in what form and in what manner. Another example, many of you would have seen this, so it's something which is very common. Self-explanatory, first humanoid robot delivered the keynote speech at a Miami Agenda in 18, AI agenda that was, and interestingly she said, and this is a artificially intelligent humanoid, she said, and mind you, delivering keynote means that you're able to not only say certain things right, keynote would also mean that you'll have to speak in a certain way, you have to speak with knowledge on a technical subject, so it's not easy. And already AI is able to reach that stage where robots are able to do that. And she said the hardest thing to learn is human emotion, as they are too many and too complex. But this is 2017-18 when the humanoid was being programmed and prepared. It's already 2020, and many AI applications are already there where human emotions are slowly getting replicated. I'll give you one example. So that's how fast things are changing. I often say, interestingly, on a lighter note, that Darwinian theory says that man sits on the top of the animal chain because he or she is the most important and the most intelligent, etc. And God knows, maybe 50, 100 years from now, I don't know, maybe social scientists would probably have a better take on this, but social science experts or biotech experts who understand Darwinian evolution better than me would probably know better or be able to prophesize and predict better than me. But I wonder that maybe 100 years from now, will man himself create a machine, an artificially intelligent machine, which is more intelligent than a human being, and therefore would replace this human being from the top of the animal chain? Quite possible. It may not sound, if it sounds absurd, I would say just hold your horses. Obviously, at least I will, and many of my generation will not be here 50 years from now, and many of you would still be there. Wait and watch, it might just happen. AI technologies were in some organizations, thankfully not yet applied in India because there's a law about it. One can study your facial recognition, and not only say who you are, but from your facial expressions, these are AI technologies available, where I can read various parts of your emotion and read your emotion and read the actual you, whether you are lying, you are truthful, you're honest, you're dishonest. So being used in interviews in various cases, being used by the police during interrogation, this is already available. It's a brand name you find here called Emotion, which is emotional quotient. I think they have clubbed it to Emotion. And you can figure out contempt, sadness, joy, fear, anger, whatever emotion you talk about. So these are already available, that your face is a giveaway. And till yesterday in an interview, I could only sit across the table from you and try and judge you basis my experience and maybe a bit of gut feel. But today I have access to technologies which will do it inside out. You cannot fool it. It's like those technologies that are already available and in use, where you have facial recognition saying that, yes, am I so-and-so? Yes, you are so-and-so. So you have access to a security area which is security perimetered. You only have security clearance to go there, and your facial recognition. But this is just not facial recognition. This is emotion recognition. Facial recognition is just the physical facial contours, and this is emotion recognition, which is normally hidden, and yet AI can see that. So imagine the kind of careers in HR, how HR will transform itself over time, how new HR professionals would have to relearn their skills. If I don't relearn my skills today with 25 plus years experience, I'm no different to somebody who has 0 year experience. It's all the same. So if I don't realize that I'll have to relearn and be aware of what's happening around me in the world, I will be outdated sooner than I can realize. My 25 years of experience will be equal to 0, because the ecosystem that I will be required to work in has shifted completely, has changed completely, has metamorphed completely. One interesting fact, and that's something I wanted to share with you, that the Facebook was doing an artificial intelligence exercise, and this is something I want to come back here on. I'm sure had this been a physical program where I could see all of you, I would have experimented this differently. But since it's on virtual platform, Facebook uses a lot of AI. You might be very familiar with it. You will say that, they'll ask you some this apparently stupid questions, and I see hundreds and thousands respond to it enthusiastically. Apparently silly questions like, you look like some celebrity and your face recognizes or is similar to so-and-so celebrity, and they'll post 2 pictures next to each other, 2 faces, and ask you some questions about yourself or something, and you'll answer. And then they'll come up with an answer saying you're similar to so-and-so celebrity, and you'll repost it with a lot of fascination and happiness on your Facebook page, and thousands of them will come and like it, so on and so forth. Little realizing that you are being artificially intelligent machine is mapping you and drawing certain conclusions about you as a human being, as a user of Facebook. I'm not saying that's wrong. Please don't misunderstand. I'm only saying that's technology. All I'm saying is that these technologies are in play. But one interesting thing happened in Facebook. They had one such AI intelligent machine which they developed, two such in fact, for a certain activity. And interestingly, one day the scientists or the experts who were actually designing those AI machines or had just designed them and got them ready to do a certain task, they came to their laboratory and they found that these two machines were interacting amongst themselves, which they were intelligent enough to do. That was programmed. They were supposed to interact with each other. But, and here comes the clincher, they were interacting with each other using a language which these experts could not fathom. The creators of the machines could not fathom a language which they had generated themselves from their own intelligence, which they were using to converse, interact with each other between machine 1 and machine 2, which was Greek and Latin and Hebrew to the scientists who were designing that or who got that ready. So God knows what they were saying, and they got so paranoid, so afraid that they shut the entire machine system down. They switched the entire project off. But these are telltale signals of what I said a while back, that should we and would we create intelligent machines, we make them so intelligent that tomorrow they outperform us, and they become so intelligent that they become intelligent enough to do new things not taught to them by us. So that's a fascinating thought, and it's no more a maybe. It already happened in Facebook. They have shut that down. This, I think, happened in 2018-19, if I remember, and this is that example. This is the gentleman who actually was part of that project. Facebook's artificial intelligence robot shut down after they start talking to each other in their own language. So it's a scary thought. Now this is a reality. It's already happened. Therefore, please remember that for you in career, it is moving from, AI along with big data has become a true disruptor. Because data is now external to current HR systems and therefore has tremendous potential. For example, tomorrow if you apply to an organization, please remember, when you apply, HR need not necessarily look at your CV only. They need not, and probably they will not. They will also, depending on the kind of technology they are using, not all organizations will be able to do it immediately, but some will, depending on the basic level of AI they are using, if they are, many are using already. They will apply that AI tool. That AI tool will go back in your social media behavior for the last 3-4 years. Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, you have it. And they will study that and they will draw profiles of you, what kind of a person you truly are. And that will be far more accurate than what I can fathom from A, your CV, and B, an interaction called interview of half an hour. Whatever I could fathom in that interview and from your CV will be 10% as accurate as what these machines will be able to do by observing, mapping, and calibrating and concluding from what you have done, your behavior on social media. Because on social media, usually you are your true self. You're reacting, putting a like in a certain kind of a message, putting a dislike in a certain other kind of a message, posting certain kind of information, movies, dialogues, whatever. Whether on Facebook or doing certain activities on LinkedIn or on WhatsApp, you name it, Twitter, doesn't matter. These activities using big data, this is big data, which means millions of such individuals, billions and zillions of such data points, and AI can harness that data and quickly synthesize and give it to me that so-and-so has applied, his actual profile or her actual profile, the real him or her is this kind. And it's a key and strategic mind shift where from I think it will move to I know, because I will map you exactly. This will only increase as time goes by, and probably, not till now, but probably the good old CV is well nigh dead. Not yet. You will still be required to give a CV at least in the next 3-4 years, I'm sure. But I'm talking about the slightly medium future. This will no more be required because everything will be available. There are certain organizations who are already practicing this, like IBM. They have their separate program which they run on this, etc. There are others also. But the point remains that, of course, it's still about maybe 5% of organizations who are doing this today. But it will only rapidly become very big in the next 5 to 10 years. The last part, therefore, from World Economic Forum, some of the skill sets that we believe will be important for all of us. And when I say 2015 to 2020, look at the shift of skills. And 2020 doesn't mean this will no more be valid over the next 2-3 years. This will remain valid. And if you've noticed that there has been a change in the order of what to, sorry, I'm so sorry, I think, yeah. Yeah. Just to pause, is this visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
thank
it's
you. Okay, so in 2020, some of the skills which are self-explanatory, complex problem solving and critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, a slight shift from what it was in 2015. And what is important here is that complex problem solving, critical thinking, these are areas largely, if you notice, which are more because of your right brain. It's your EQ, emotional quotient. And these are skills that will become increasingly important, increasingly in vogue, increasingly in demand. And one needs to know how to develop these skills, how to therefore be able to use this at your workplace, because that will make a difference between you and many of your colleagues or competition. Self-explanatory, I'm not getting into too much of details here, but the point is that these are some of the things that are becoming important or has become important. Always remember that Jeff Weiner, CEO of LinkedIn, has said, this is his quote, there are 3 things that will shape the future of talent, which is all of us: artificial intelligence and automation, the skill gap between if you are not skilled enough to operate in that VUCA environment, and the rise of independent work, which I was talking about, that all of you will have the option to not only do regular work, but also do parallelly or completely independently multiple other jobs because of technology. Sitting at one point and one space, at one specific place, you can work for multiple employers from multiple parts of the world at the same time and earn much more than many of us could ever, because the technologies were not there. So independent work will be a very, very big opportunity area for many of you. I will skip this because this is my last slide here, is that this is a prediction from global studies. 60% plus of the best jobs of next decade does not exist today. When I say best jobs, ones that will be most in demand, ones that will be the most well paid, have not even come into life today. And that's the kind of change we are talking about. There's enough and more research to establish this. I don't want to get into the research data here, but the truth is there's debate whether it is 50% or 60%. There's still some debate, but a significant large number of jobs does not exist today that will be in demand over the next 10 years. So fundamental takeaway, therefore, that was my last point. Fundamental learning, 3 things. Change is significant and a reality. Change is fast in the blink of an eye. It's important for all of us to therefore not only learn what we are learning at college, which is essential, important, and critical as a solid base. Beyond that, learning and adapting to the ecosystem that's happening around me continuously, not only now for the rest of your career, to stay relevant is very, very important for all of us. Because, as again, many of the jobs that will be the most in demand and most well paid over the next decade, 2 decades, don't even exist today. Thank you very much. That's where I'll end for the moment.
So it was a wonderful deliberation, and as you have rightly pointed out, it's the speed and not the size that determines who will survive in this new normal. Reskilling is the calling of the day. It's the call of the day. As an individual, we should be willing to explore. We should be adapting ourselves to the ecosystem and should be agile. As I can see, there are many questions in the chat box. So
sure.
We will go.
Please.
So the first question is by our student from second year, Mr. Ayush Gupta. So Ayush, can you ask the question? Will you ask him the question?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Haldar, my first question was, I asked in my chat box also, sir, do you think crowdsourcing is misleading at this VUCA ecosystem? So sometimes it might get misleading in terms.
Could you explain, when you say misleading, what exactly would you mean? If you could elaborate a bit.
sometimes when you crowdsource, so
Yeah.
there it might lead to some misinterpretation between the employees and the employers. So you never know that for which company you are actually working for, and maybe
It is
you
true.
might not. Yeah,
It
yeah,
is true. In fact, you're right. In fact, I mentioned crowdsource, and when I was doing that, it's a good question. See, I did mention, if I remember, that those who do crowdsource, and I mentioned Wikipedia as an example. Wikipedia, therefore, the information and data on Wikipedia, which is often crowdsourced, is not very reliable. Never rely on Wikipedia data by definition, because it is crowdsourced and not necessarily ratified and filtered. Therefore, often Wikipedia data is incorrect. So if that's what you mean, yes, it leads to that possibility. The second chance you're saying is that if you're saying I'm crowdsourcing, do I really know who I'm crowdsourcing for? Is that your
exactly.
question?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir,
So
exactly.
see, answer could be yes and no. You might fall by into the trap of somebody who's a fly-by-night operator and end up doing crowdsourcing for that kind of a fly-by-night operator, or for a reliable established organization also. That depends on the kind of research that you would do about whom you are crowdsourcing for. In today's world of highly connected technologies, I don't think that it is easy for people to hide, or organizations to hide the true credibility that they have, if at all any. If somebody has a bad reputation or has had a bad rep, it's extremely difficult in today's world of high connectivity and social media to prevent yourself from getting exposed. I'm not saying impossible, but if you do a bit of research, I'm sure you will get information about such organizations as being good or not reputable, etc., etc. Will you be always exactly 100% correct? Maybe not. But that doesn't mean you will not explore crowdsourcing, because it's a good opportunity for you to not only forget earning, it's a good learning platform. And this is a good platform for you to explore your skills while you are even doing your curriculum like you're doing today. So it's a good practice field, if nothing else.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah. Our next question is by Amrita. She's also a student from second year. So Amrita,
Okay.
can you ask your question, please? Amrita?
Good afternoon, sir.
Good
So,
afternoon.
as the industry is going through VUCA times, so how do we students prepare for that?
I wish I could give an easy answer. I'll be lying to you if I can give you a one-line answer. I can't, because there is no easy solution, honestly. I think the first challenge is, or the first learning step is that, are we aware of what's happening around me? I think that's the first and the most important thing, that first be aware. And see, there are too many things happening around you. If you try and learn and be aware of everything, we'll all get lost. Depending on your, and that's my humble suggestion. I mean, there are other senior, there are faculty members, there's a director, all of you, I would request all of you to please put it. This is not just my view, because this is not, as I said in my first slide, if you remember, it's a VUCA world and one blind man leading the other, according to me. I don't think I have all the answers, honestly. All I can submit is that it's going to be a complex and in the true sense of VUCA world. Therefore, to answer your question, first be aware, but be aware in a limited area of your interest. That's the only hope in hell you have, or any one of us have. If I try to be interested in everything, then I think I might get lost. So depending on your by preference, I don't just mean your overall domain. For example, you might be doing an MBA, say, for example, in marketing, or somebody else could be in finance, somebody else could be doing in HR, and so on and so forth. That's an overall domain. Within that also, you might have a fascination say you might be fascinated, you want a career later on, let's say in brand within marketing, or let's say in talent management within HR, or something like that. So zero in on your passion and then try and explore what's happening in the world on that specific subdomain, if I may so call it. At least it will focus your efforts better to be aware of what's happening, because otherwise there's too much happening on everything. Number one. Number two, much of these new skills, once you know, aware in that specific subdomain what is happening, you will find hundreds of online skill building, I would call it courses for want of better word, that are available, many of them free of cost, which are available, which will give you basic orientation to that area of interest that you have in a IR4 scenario, with a technology scenario, in an AI enabled scenario, whatever the change in that subdomain that may happen over the next 10 years, how can you be ready? There are hundreds of such courses available in most of these areas, which you can pick up and learn. In many cases, these are short-term ones, 2 months, 3 months. You need not become a PhD in that, because obviously you don't have to become an AI scientist in your career tomorrow. That's not required. That's a wrong approach. You need to stay focused on your core area. Could be your MBA, whatever MBA you might be doing or whatever you might be doing. And within that, see how technology can play a role and how you can use technology to advance your skill in your domain, and focus your research on that area. That's the way I would look at it, rather than trying to go all over the place. I wish I could give a more easy answer, but I honestly can't, because there aren't any. It's a question of R&D that one needs to do. But I would urge both Professor Basu, Professor Director Sir, or anybody else would like to give any views on that, because it's just my view that I could share, because that's an important question she asked.
Yeah, exactly so. So that is the reason we always tell our students that there are many courses available in Coursera, apart from your academics and your courses. Many courses available in your Coursera, edX, and then Harvard. So they can go for those courses which will suit their requirement. So that will help them to.
And to do that, absolutely. And to do that, my step one suggestion would be, please first identify what is your passion area at a subdomain level. Don't try to do everything, because you'll get lost. It's too much happening outside, trust me.
Right. And it should be based on your school skills rather than what your friends are doing. So
absolutely.
what your friends are doing, which may not suit
your passion and your skill.
Exactly so. So thank you so much. And our third question is by.
Yeah, please, sir.
Thank you. So our third question is from Aditya Divanji. Aditya, can you put your microphone on and ask the question, please?
A very good afternoon to you, sir, and everyone present here. Sir, we see with the Industry Revolution 4.0, all organizations are moving towards automation and digitization to improve their production efficiency and reducing their cost.
Absolutely.
But from an economic perspective, is that good? Because a GDP of a country like India might increase with the more goods and service produced, but with the increasing rate of unemployment. A lot of retrenchment is happening. We can see like all of the jobs are being taken up by robots. So per capita income might come down. So what are your thoughts on that, sir?
Very important question.
Very important question also. Very, very relevant question. My first caveat, I'll start with a caveat with that question. I, by no stretch of imagination, am I an economist. So I'm not an expert when I'm going to answer this. I'll answer this from an industry expertise perspective. So it may not be an economist answering this. So that's my caveat, because economics is not my subject. I am not an expert on that by far. So my answer to that is, my first honest answer, and it might not be comfortable to many or maybe many, because I faced this question in other forum and I've given the same answer and I've got a very mixed response, some very hostile and some very kind of acceptable answer. My only reaction is, you don't have a choice, buddy. The question is why I say this. See, technology, unfortunately, is a reality of times. You cannot stop technology from coming. It's a question of whether 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or 15 years from now. In the history, if you go back in history of man, civilization, we have not been able to stop technology from coming. There were a lot of hue and cry. I go back, maybe you all were not born, I know, but I was a kid at that time, 35 years back plus. And I'm sure the director, sir, Professor Basu, and those in our generation and senior to me would relate to this. There was a massive hue and cry in India and West Bengal when computers were brought in somewhere in the early mid-80s. Massive hue and cry, jobs will go, this will happen, that will happen, people will all die, per capita will come down, and there was a massive chaos, political opposition, and not always just for politics, maybe because people were genuinely worried or concerned. This was 1984, 85, if I'm not wrong. I may be wrong because I was also a small child. I guess around that time. And look at today, 2020. Has really India gone back on any of those parameters after IT revolution, or India has gone ahead? In all the parameters of economics, on per capita, on GDP, on employment, you name it. if India has moved forward, which I think it has between 1985 to today, then I think we need not worry unnecessarily. Prima facie, it looks worrisome, I agree. But I think if we look back in history, history teaches us a lot of things, and I'm pretty hopeful that it will only augur well on all the economic terms. Just one last point. However, I have one last point. Again, as I'm not an economist, but I'll make this statement. I think that the tomorrow's world over the next 30 years, particularly AI-enabled world, will be a very different world to today. So the rules of economics might have to change. And that is my submission. The way we look at economics today and economies today of the country, based on GDP, per capita, etc., might need to be revisited, because probably that world will be so different with too much of automation, very few quote unquote conventionally jobs as an indicator of employment, as an indicator of economy. These definitions and parameters, I'm making a radical statement. I know some might say abnormal, absurd statement, possibly. But I think those parameters will have to be revisited fundamentally, because there's no point trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It will be a misfit. Using today's economics parameters to define that world 30 years from now, in my view, will be a wrong effort. But between now and 30 years, I don't think there'll be all hell breaking loose. It hasn't so far. Even IT revolution actually enhanced it. I think so will this, as long as people, because please understand, jobs will go is a worry. But what we are failing to understand, that if 10 jobs go, 100 jobs will emerge. Exactly what happened in IT. You remember one slide, typewriter, when I said careers are gone, there was a picture of a typewriter. Thousands and millions were typists as a job. It's a very common job in the world yesterday. It's gone today. Does it mean that people are unemployed? No, they have got new employment. So I think that similar something will happen. But again, I'm not an economist. I would urge, if there is an economist expert here, to add, agree, disagree.
All right, thank you, sir. Sir, I have one more question.
Sure.
Sir, with the onset of concepts like big data and machine learning, we see
Yes.
a lot of private data is being hoarded and being circulated in the market. So we see our privacy is being compromised in some way or the other. So how can we tackle that?
You can't.
Right,
sorry
sir.
for a blunt answer. You can't,
Right.
because I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Are you on Facebook? Answer
Yes,
is
sir.
yes. It's a
Yes,
stupid
sir.
question. Are you on LinkedIn? Answer is yes. Stupid
Yes,
question.
sir.
Are you on Twitter? Answer is yes. Am I right? No, maybe
sir,
not Twitter.
Not there on Twitter.
Okay. So you're on WhatsApp?
Yes,
Answer
sir.
is yes. For 3 to 4 years plus on all these?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I'm sure that is the same for all of your friends in this forum and many others, including me. If you're there on these social media for 3+ years and you are reasonably active, you're not even very active, your privacy is already lost. It's not a maybe, it's already gone, history. If you think that you have a private life, you know where your girlfriend is secretly tucked away, everybody should want to know about it, is easy. I just need to explore with the AI tool, and that's very basic level AI, by the way, no high-end AI.
Right,
It
sir.
will come out in 5 minutes. So you don't have a secret life anymore. None of us do.
Right, sir.
So
Sir,
that's a given. That's a given. Is it good or bad? I don't know. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sir, like you said, some HR companies, they can look into our WhatsApp and Facebook profile and give it to some other
That was
companies.
one.
To do
No, not other companies. They can use it to analyze and profile you. That's
Okay.
right. Yeah.
So, sir, but isn't that infringement of privacy? Like Facebook and WhatsApp, they have their own privacy policies. So is that ethical and legal to do that?
It's your opinion versus mine on this. I don't know. Ethical depends on what you defined ethics as. The counter question could be, is it ethical? Not you. When I say you, I don't mean you. Anybody. In an interview, supposing, and all of us do it, we try to fudge and lie low and say yes when I'm supposed to say no, etc. Is that ethical? So the question is, there is no fine line between ethics and what is not ethical. I also honestly don't know. Is it ethical prima facie in one context? No. It depends on which perspective you take. If you're taking the individual perspective, it's no. If you're taking the employer perspective, it's perfectly ethical to figure out who am I hiring and paying. How really are you really honest as you claim you are? So it depends on which way you look at it, really. And so these are complex questions, complex social science questions. I think social scientists would probably have to deal with. But the technology, the reality of that will be here to stay, and it will only increase. That you can't stop. How you adapt to that as a whole set of civilization, I think it's a journey. I don't know whether we have all the answers today. Maybe we don't have all the answers today.
Yeah, that's very true. So we can't help it. We can't help it.
Can't help it. I mean.
But, yeah.
And as I always say, I don't have all the answers. Honestly, don't.
Mr. Halder, we have got the last question by our student, Ananya Banerjee. So, Ananya, can you ask your question, please?
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am, and all others present here.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
So my question is that what is the scope in HR in this VUCA time? Like in which way an HR himself or herself can develop them in order to sustain in this VUCA time?
Okay, is your question more from a getting a job perspective or becoming a successful HR person? They are two different things.
So,
or is it both?
Becoming a successful HR.
Okay, getting a job is easy, especially from your kind of campus. And I'm saying this not because I'm saying to you, I know placements are very good. I've been involved with your campus in bits and pieces many times in the past, many years in the past. So if you are reasonably good in your side, that's a preferred location for many corporates. They'll come and pick you up. But I think that's a least of the worry. But the bigger challenge will start.
Yes.
The campus will do their job in getting you placed in a good, but then the bigger challenge starts. The fun starts after that, when you will be having hundreds of competitors, in the HR space, not only in your company where you join, but in the HR ecosystem across other HR professionals in other companies, etc. So in order to become a successful HR professional, for that matter, a successful professional, why only HR? I think, as I keep saying, you need to be able to harness technology to make best use of what your domain knowledge is like. So for example, just go back to this previous conversation we were having with the previous question. Supposing you are joining in HR and you want to become an expert, let's say in talent acquisition, just one example. Now, today the usual practice is to get CVs, interview people and hire somebody at best and at most. Use profiling tools like psychographic tools, which are pen and paper exercises, to try and have an empirical, indicative idea about what kind of a person you are on certain behavioral parameters. So that's about it. So if you can, with your knowledge of not only HR, but also a bit of AI, you can bring in those expertise to the table in your organization and the HR's ecosystem overall of how AI can also augment and add value in the hiring process. You have a plus, which many of your colleagues may not. So it could be specific. If it's the same case you want to apply in talent management, you might have to pick up some other skill. I'm giving one example. And this can be a long conversation, but this is giving one example of how you can possibly augment your knowledge of what you have learned in the campus by using additional skills, which you can pick up, as I kept saying a while back, from multiple sources, easily available now because of the animal called internet. From various places, you have to decide what is your choice and what is your preference and what is your passion. Beyond that, you have to obviously have the basic few, which are always true. You must be having the right passion and the right commitment to the job. I think that's a given. Those are given. I'm not getting back there. But those are obvious.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. Welcome. But this is a long discussion, Ananya. I don't have time for it, but otherwise it would have taken a long discussion. It actually can have a long answer, but I'm restricting it specifically to a short one because of the context.
Yeah, we will have another session on this.
Sure, please. Anytime.
We will have another session.
Thank you so much, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you, Ananya. And every good thing has come to an end. So now I would request my colleague, Dr. Madhurima Ganguly, to offer the vote of thanks. Over to you, Madhurima.
Thank you, Dr. Basu. It makes me feel honored to deliver the vote of thanks to Mr. Sugato Haldar, Associate Partner, MCHC Business and HR Consulting Firm. Thank you, Mr. Haldar, for your insightful deliberations